Okay, hello everyone. It is very nice to meet you all, and thank you very much for joining me in this brief lecture. My name is Chakrit Sangkamani, and I am an anthropologist from Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok, Thailand. So it is my great pleasure to be here, and I am very much looking forward to meeting you all next week during our discussion session. So, what I would like to share with you all today is on the idea of sedimentary thinking, which is shown in the slide here, and this is something that I have been thinking recently during my encounter with the case study during the past few months. So it is of course very quite recent, but I would like to throw this into water and to see how or what kind of effect it will create, from the session. So before I start the lecture, let me give you some brief information of where I am coming from academically. As an anthropologist and SCS academic, I have been interested in looking at the so-called hydrosociality, which is a relation between water and the society. So to use the term, society in a flexible and modern human inclusive fashion. In exploring the entangled relations of hydrosociality, I have been looking at different case studies. For example, I study a cultural community of hydrologists and water engineers in the bureaucracy and the academic institution in Thailand. I also would like to know about their epistemic culture, as well as the day-to-day practices in relation to the implementing of techno-scientific knowledge into a larger scheme of water development in Thailand. I also very much interested in infrastructure, especially water infrastructure, and how we can use the infrastructure to portray actually the modern human relations surrounding the politics of water management. And one of the paper that has been assigned for your reading is on the construction of the first modern dam in Thailand in relation to knowledge and technology transfer from the West to Thailand during the Cold War. So my work is on the infrastructure, the community of the water expertise, but I also follow the flow of the water, from the upstream down to the delta area. I also look at the phenomenon of water in the delta city like Bangkok, and to understand how water can actually create certain kind of emergent effect to the people and the politics of participation in the city as well, especially looking at the politics of atmosphere, the awareness, and the acknowledgement of the people who are being stuck in the flood and rain. So this is also one of the assigned reading for you as well. What I would like to share with you today is about what I have learned from my engagement with the recent workshop called Modern Human and Ecological Justice, which I participated in the workshop during September this year in Chiang Mai, north of Thailand. So during the workshop, we had a chance to visit one of the ethnic communities in the mountainous border area between Thai and Myanmar. The community we have visited is a community that being targeted for a mega project for interbasin water diversion. So I will talk about this particular case in this lecture, and hope that we can probably connect the idea from this case and then link it with the other two cases from the reading. One is on the construction of the dam, and the other one is on the politics of flood in Bangkok during our discussion session later on. But beside the case here, in terms of conceptual discussion in this lecture, I also would like to bring up the idea of sediment, the sedimentation, and sedimentary thinking. This is something that, as I already mentioned, what I have learned from being there in the community. And I would like to invite you all to join me in thinking about how the analogy of sediment and the sedimentation can actually provide us a conceptual heuristic tool in considering the politics of knowledge contestation, the knowledge transfer, and the knowledge acknowledgement in environmental and developmental politics. So without any further ado, let me begin with what I learned during my September visit to the so-called Karen community in the mountainous region in the northern part of Thailand. The Karen ethnic community of Mae Ngau is located at the confluence of the Ngau and Yuam rivers. So people's livelihood there are actually heavily reliant on the ecosystem in which they have live with. For example, they rely on the forest for food production, for agriculture, and for housing building material. They also rely on the river very much, particularly on fishery and for different kind of ritualistic ceremony. The area in which they now live is, as I already mentioned, being targeted as a site for the construction of the water diversion project, which will include the construction of a dam, a sedimentation trap station, and a water pumping station, and also an underground tunnel to transport or to divert water from this river basin to a reservoir of the Pumipon Dam, which is around 62 kilometers away from the community. This is for the irrigation and especially for electricity generation purpose. This is a part of a larger project of interbasin water diversion under the Thai government's National Water Management Scheme. So you can see from this image, let me point out that this is the where the community is located, and here is a reservoir from another large dam in the central basin of Thailand. The reservoir itself has insufficient water to feed the reservoir all year round. So that is the reason why they need to use the underground water tunnel to divert the water from this Yuam river basin to another river basin to feed the reservoir and especially to feed the electricity generation capacity. And this is a simplified representation from the government pamphlet, given to the villager to show how the project will look like. Well, during our visit to the community, the villagers were quite busy conducting their own research on the ecology and the potential consequences of the project implementation. This villagers' research is actually intended to serve as a counter narrative to the EIA or the Environmental Impact Assessment report on the project, which is prepared by the university expert in support of the project construction. One of the project management issues is in this massive, water diversion project is to deal with the sediment issue. River, as we will see from the next the photo from the next slide, is filled with lots of sediment. The plan is for the project to actually filter the water by trapping some of the sediment before pumping and diverting it into a tunnel. So the infrastructural trap sediment will actually accumulate and remain in this water basin. However, some of the suspended sediment cannot be trapped, right? So will be transported into the water, and diverted into another river system, in a short period of time. So you can guess from this, simple explanation that this kind of technical intervention, to actually trapping the sediment at one of the basin, or even to transport the basin, the sediment from one basin to another, will have a huge impact, whether on morphology, on the topography, or to the ecology at large. And this can also be thought of as a tipper for a furrow effects, to use Anna Singh's term. So this is a picture of the infrastructure that has been proposed. You can see that this is a dam, and they use this building as one of the sediment trapping station, before pumping and putting the water into the diversion tunnel. And this is the plan for the tunnel. So one of the important sites that the villager took us during our visit is to see the confluence between the Ngao and the Yuam River. And you can see that clearly at the confluence here, that how water from two rivers actually merge into one. This is one river and this is another river. The reason why we can see that there are two distinctive river systems here is that because they contain different sort of sediment. One is quite greenish, right? And the other side, is quite brown and muddy. So according to the villagers, sediment play a very important role in their interactions with the riverine system. It defines, for example, it defines the type, the character, and also the delicacy, the taste of the fish. It specifies which rivers should be used for which ritualistic and cultural activities. It indicates where and what upstream condition the water has passed through. It also tells us about the seasonal dynamic of the ecosystem. So in other words, sediment can be seen as a portal in understanding the complex and dynamic acknowledgement between human ecologies and other modern human agents. So now we see that the villagers, for the villager themselves, the sedimentation and the sediment itself are important components and a causal relation of the riverine system. This is probably contrast to the way the project designer and expert perceive sediment in relation to their tunnel project, right? So, but what exactly is sediment? We talk quite a lot about sediment. What exactly is it about? Sediment has been broadly defined as any living or non-living material that is transported primarily by water. We call it fluvial process. But it is not only the water that can transport sediment. It can be a gravity force, or it can be force from wind blow as well. So sedimentation is also a process of deposition of the sediment in natural environment. So in order to understand the villagers' situated knowledge about the sediment, they talk quite a lot about how sediment related to their livelihood. Um, First of all, we must comprehend the process of the so-called sediment becoming as part of the larger encounter and entanglement of multiple ontological actors that they travel through the unanticipated ever-changing travel of the river. So this will allow us to actually grasp the concept of sedimentary thinking. It can be which can be defined as epistemic and methodological approach to tracing the flux, the flow, and the formation of the sedimentation, as well as its changing fluid geographies. For example, we talk about real flow from upstream to downstream, from valley to delta, from one basin to another. So when we look closely, probably exercising the art of noticing, we start to see that sedimentation process can actually provide us, multifaceted perspective in looking ontologically about the political relations associated in the formation of sediment. For example, the process of sedimentation first of all requires conjunctive forces. I talk about water, I talk about wind, I talk about gravity, and we talk about like water pumping station and other human intervention in the real flow. So that require conjunctive forces in order to move the sediment. But sedimentation also traversed distinct geography, right? It interacts with various material and non-materials, both organic and inorganic, right? Sedimentation also change the sedimentary forms and composition as they travel. So it actually transcends the boundary between between the solidity and liquidity of its matter, right? Also, during the process of sedimentation, sediment is mobile and immobile. It depends on the situation and context. So actually, the sediment or sedimentation is actually situated in various spatial temporalities. And of course, we talk about sedimentation that can be noticed and can be unnoticed or being ignored by human eyes and other more than human cognition as well. And of course, sedimentation is directly and indirectly entwined with human livelihood and modern human relation. So there are a lot of aspects that we can use sediment to think about the ontological relations, association between the sediment itself and its surrounding. So what I have mentioned just now is from biogeographical perspective, but I also would like to invite you to think about sediment in terms of politics as well, by comparing sediment flow and formation with knowledge transfer and production. So sedimentation can be compared to a process of knowledge production in which certain type of or certain elements are co-produced, being hybridized, being mobilized, and being materialized against the other form of currents and substances in the environment. So in that sense, it becomes firmly acknowledged as the island of knowledge. We can call it expertise. So the knowledge as well as the sediment, on one hand, can be very generative. We learn from the villager that the sediment provides source of food and nutrient to aquatic animals, to plants, and to human. It also it enrich the villagers' spiritual and economic activities. to name a few. But on the other hand, sediment can also be destructive and harmful. For example, the diversion of water from one river, which leave a large amount of sediment in the basin, will undoubtedly cause dramatic changes in the ecosystem. And similarly, moving one set of sediment from one basin to another without taking into account of its complex components will also result in an unexpected change in the river, in the dumping site as well. So we are talking about, for example, like organic matter that belong to one ecosystem but not the other, right? So this kind of thing is, I don't know whether we can consider it as a hyper object, or not, because the agency of the sediment is beyond our spatial and temporal perception and cognition. But now I would like to sort of step back a little, from the case study and to actually bring you back into the past contribution that we have learned from the STS scholar in relation to knowledge, including science production. From Latour to Haraway, we have learned so much that all kind of knowledge, including scientific knowledge, is situated, right? So this is the sense that, in the sense that knowledge are constructed, knowledge are being assembled within a particular set of values, materials, relations, facts, and concerns. In that sense, scientific knowledge and also other kind of knowledge production is a kind of social activity. And we talk about social here in the Latourian, sense that it is mean human and non-human, association, right? So of course, knowledge production need people, need equipment, need institution, need different kind of networks. So this is the contribution from actor network theory, from modern human association approach that we have learned in the STS in relation to knowledge production. But in this lecture, I would also like to highlight another side of knowledge production, which is also a local or a villager's knowledge production, as a counter narrative to expert knowledge. I think we have learned quite a lot from, especially from the global south, that local knowledge has been widely used to express and to redefine people's and community rights, and to reclaim environmental justice. And in Thailand and also in our neighboring countries, this is also the case. For example, a Thai ban, or in Thai we call Thai ban, which is mean villagers, research, has began in the Pak Moon community in northeastern Thailand during 2000. So it was produced as a counter-hegemonic, counter-technocratic, and counter-human-centric approach to ecology, which is portrayed mostly in the EIA and expertise report on the dam construction. So as a situated sedimentation of knowledge, Taiwan research actually came up with a distinctive set of methodology to illustrate the wording process and day-to-day livelihood in relation to ecology. For example, it paid attention to how people interact with riverscapes and other modern human entities in the culture. They also used semantic analysis of water knowledge, for example, using language, terminology, taxonomy, symbols, rituals, different kind of folk classification and myth, mythology related to the river livelihood to depict their ontological relation with the river system as well. They also trace local history of the river, and also to understand the cultural adaptation and also non-human adaptation to the changing river system as well. They, in other words, trying to embrace distinctive ontological actors into the network of relation in knowledge production. And of course, they consider knowledge transformation and hybridization, as part of the crucial process in knowledge production as well. So now let me bring you back to the confluence of the river, where we have started, and to use the idea of thinking ontologically about the sediment to capture the nature and the complexity of knowledge production, the knowledge implementation and contestation. So when we observe closely from the local production of knowledge, we can see that the confluence, for the villagers means, overcoming duality, overcoming separation, or overcoming violently imposition of knowledge onto the locality. But rather, the local knowledge that the people portray is an attempt to acknowledge the flow, the convergence, the multiplicity, and the exchange along the travel over the changing geographies. So the confluence of sediment, just like confluence of the knowledge, can have different dimensions. It can be spatial, it can be temporal, it can be material, can be conceptual, can be relational, or can be ever-changing assemblage of all of the above. So in this sense, a plausible direction in our knowledge production, or in comprehending the travel of knowledge in different geography, is to recognize the multiplicity of logic and practices and actors that underlies the co-creation and the formation of the knowledge. So my final take here from our quick look at the case study here is that we might consider an attempt to de-sedimentalize the river, by the expert, or the attempt to divert the water from one river to the other, through the tunnel, is a kind of an anthropocentric intervention that ignore the complexity of sediments, and knowledge itinerary, and the changing relationship with different geographies. So in other words, importing knowledge or importing technology into a new place without care is like dumping a sediment, from one basin to another, which oftentimes lead to the turbidity. The turbidity mean unsettling relation, of elements. Everything float around, in a very turbulent relation. It might create violence of unexpected encountering, and because this kind of stirring, of the water current, the turbidity that has been created, it made visible many missing masses that it might stir up and also create a new kind of social or political or ecological turbulence. We might not know. So, well, I would like to actually end my presentation here. The time is almost up, and I hope that it can be useful somehow to your workshop and to your exploration of geography of knowledge and STS. Before I end my lecture here, I would like to post some of the discussion point. I will not read it all here, but I hope that you can take take a look yourself, and we might bring this up in the session later on when we come to the discussion. So thank you very much, and looking forward again to see you all virtually next week. Bye bye.